All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this morning, Characteristics and Needs of Twice Exceptional or 2E Learners. My name is Mary Beth Harrison Cunningham. I'm the manager here at the Family Resource Center, and we're very excited to have Dr. Nonye Oladimeji here to tell us and talk with us about 2E learners. And Nonye is our Twice Exceptional Specialist here in Fairfax County Public Schools. So Nonye, we're very excited to have you here with us this morning, and welcome.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us this morning. Like Mary Beth said, I'm Dr. Nonye Oladimeji, and I've been in an FCPS staff for over 25 years. I'm also a mother of a 2E adult learner who went through Fairfax County. She is now doing her second year residency as a neurosurgeon in UCLA. But my first experience as a 2E learner, as a 2E specialist, was actually being a specialist to my own child. So good morning and welcome, everyone. We're gonna have questions and comments at the end, so please bear me out. I'll try to pace myself so that everybody can get what they came in here for. So why are we here today? Everyone knows that we're here to learn about 2E learners, but we're basically here to understand who twice exceptional learners are. And I chose to use the word learners because we have adult learners. We also have, when we say students, people often focus on just the K through 12 students, but we have learners just like my younger daughter, who I said is a doctor, who are constantly learning how to navigate this world that is geared towards neurotypical people, not 2E learners. So that's why I chose the word intentionally to use 2E learners. And then we'll talk about how do we develop awareness of the characteristics of 2E learners. Hopefully we'll gain skills needed to identify and to support 2E learners, not just in our county, but as a community, because I know that there's some that are not even identified, but are in living with us in our community. So I would say I'm fortunate to have been part of the FCPS strategic plan goals. And I wanted to take a moment for you all to see what the goals are, because this goal drives the work we all do in FCPS. And even my job as a 2E specialist, this is the goal that I hope that we all look at when we do the work we need to do as an FCPS employee. So the first goal is a strong start, pre-K through 12. We want our kids coming into pre-K all the way to 12th grade to have a strong start to school. The second goal is to have a safe, supported, included, and empowered learning community. And you can see we want it to be safe. When I think of safety, I'm always thinking about 2E learners, and not just our 2E learners, but every student, but of course, my focus is on 2E learners. But we also want them supported. We want all our students supported, included, and also empowered. When you're empowered, you're thriving, you're not surviving. So that's my emphasis, that they are empowered to go to be who they are meant to be. And the goal 3 is academic growth and excellence. Every kid that comes to FCPS needs to grow, not just academically, socially, and to excel in whatever they choose to do post-secondary. And then goal 4 is equitable access and opportunity. And that's truly what drives my work. Is it equitable? Can they find themselves in the curriculum? Can they find themselves in how we teach? And that's just what it is. And then hopefully goal 5, leading for tomorrow's innovation. that's why we do this work, because if all kids feel included, feel supported, have equitable access, then they go on to become leaders for tomorrow, and whatever they choose to do, that they'll be innovative and be the best in that, whatever they choose to do after school, after K through 12 schooling. So I know in most school districts, people define them. When I started in Fairfax County, that's how we define gifted and talented. And then, in NDGC, National Association of Gifted Children, this is the definition of what is giftedness. So when we define giftedness, it basically means students with gifts and talents who have the ability to perform at higher levels compared to their peers of same age and experience. That's where the caveat lies. Experience, same age and experience and environment in one or more domains. And then also students who require modifications to their educational experience to learn and to realize their potential. And that word modification with gifted student often throws a lot of people off, because a gifted student who's truly gifted needs that modification. We cannot do school as we do for them, so we need to modify the way we design the curriculum, we deliver the curriculum, and then the way we assess them. So that's what truly means. It means to be gifted. But I would like to take a moment to say same age, experience, and environment. And we know that we live in FCPS, Fairfax County, where we have so many diversity. We have diversity in terms of experiences, diversity in terms of culture, diversity in terms of families and all that. So, and diversity in terms of needs. So it's truly difficult to really find, to define giftedness without thinking about that. And that's what makes it challenging, honestly, to identify students who are gifted. Now, and I have to be honest with you, there's no state in the country where we have the same definition of how we identify gifted students. And because the federal mandate does not give us any stipulation as to how we identify gifted students, or even as to how we serve them. Some states choose not to serve gifted students. Some states choose not to identify them. So every state and every district, believe you or not just state, district, is open. How do you define it? What's your philosophy? How do you serve them? It's truly district by district. There are no two states or no two districts where you have the same. So, but in FCPS, over 10 years ago, when I started in FCPS, we had gifted and talented program. That's how my children started. But then 10 years ago, based on the environment and experience, FCPS decided to have a philosophy of not identifying students as gifted, but we choose to talk about instructional needs of individual students and how the needs can be met through multiple opportunities in the FCPS continuum of services. So we have a local norm which aligns with our practice of how do we identify, how do we meet their needs in terms of instructional needs. So that's why we moved away from that, because we're really looking at how are we meeting their instructional needs. And we have a continuum of services in FCPS Advanced Academic, where we have level 4, level 3, and level 2, and level 1, and the AAP continuum of services. Now, who are the students with gift and talent? We know they come from all racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic backgrounds. We know that these students require access to appropriate learning opportunities in order to realize their full potential. We also know that they may have learning and processing disorder, that require specialized intervention and accommodation. And we know that our gifted students with gifts and talents may also need support and guidance to develop socially and emotionally, as well as in their areas of talent. So this is a whole lot of we have to be mindful that there are no two gifted and talented students or gifts and talents that are the same. They might come from different racial backgrounds. They might have come from different ethnic and social economic backgrounds. And all these are applicable to all our students who we've identified or who we hope to identify as the advanced academic students. For this webinar, I really want you all to focus on that they may have learning and processing disorder that requires specialized intervention and accommodation, and that they also need support and guidance to develop socially and emotionally, as well as in their areas of talent. So truly the last two bullets I really want you guys to be mindful of as we proceed on. So how do we then define our two e-learners? In FCPS, we basically define our two e-learners as students who demonstrate high performance ability or academic potential, that's the word, potential, and have one or more disabilities that would qualify them for special education services that requires specialized instruction and or accommodation. These students' needs are best met with strength-based education with accommodations, services, modifications, and compensation strategies provided in response to their individual needs. That's a mouthful. But what I really want you all to focus on is that they must demonstrate high performance ability or have the potential to. They must have one or more disabilities that qualify them for special education services or have a 504. And that they require specialized instruction and accommodation. And in FCPS, the focus is on strength-based. And I know that that's not the case in all our schools. It's a large school district, and that's why my job is truly critically important that we create awareness of how we best meet the needs of our two e-learners. I started first by telling you that no two e-learners are the same. In fact, my daughter, who is a neurosurgeon, has been telling me, and I actually saw based on research, that our brain actually, everybody's brain is different. No two brains are alike. Our brains are very similar to our fingerprints. So having said that, we know that everybody's areas of strength and challenges are totally unique to the individual. And for that reason, the characteristics are not the same. So now I want us to focus on the areas of talent that we look at to identify students as students with gift and talents, or in Fairfax County are level 4 AAP or level 3 or level 2 or level 1. So when we're looking at areas of talent, we're looking at general or specific intellectual ability, meaning we call it they're well-rounded in terms of their intellectual ability. They have everything. And then some of our students have specific academic aptitude. In some cases, they might be very good readers, where we have kids in 4th grade reading at the 12th or 10th grade or 11th grade level. Some of them are good writers. Some, their talents might be in the area of math. science, social studies, or world languages. My second child, who's a 2E learner, struggled with writing. That's how she knew in second grade that something was wrong. Math and science were her strength. And she happened to have been in an immersion school, a Spanish immersion school, when all this was going on in her little brain. So everybody has a different talent. Some of our students are creative or productive thinkers. You know, when we think about, some of them can think of things that you and I might not even think of, or produce something that you're like, wow, I can't even believe that this child is capable of doing this. Some of our students have leadership abilities. You know, when I go to, there's a kid who I used to teach who was in ROTC and is now an Army colonel. When I think of him, I'm like, wow, he always had that. He always wanted to take charge. He was always in my class wanting to know, how can I help you? And for some of our students, visual arts, you know, I think about the Van Goghs and all those artists, and also kids who right now in our classrooms are sitting, and when you bring them into an art class, that's where they shine the most. And then we have our performing arts, our theater kids, our dance, music, you know, the band, the orchestra, speech and debate, and musical or yeah, so they are everywhere, and some of them are great sports. They have the musical talent, but also some of them are very good athletically, and they shine in those areas. But in FCPS, even though we acknowledge that there are different areas of talent, our focus has always been, for the past 10 years, even before we went the route of AAP, not gifted and talented, has always been in academic aptitude. But having said that, we acknowledge that most of our 2E kids, academic aptitude alone doesn't meet their needs. So we have to also focus on their other areas of talent that they bring along with them. So when we're talking about gift, we cannot talk about 2E learners without talking about the gifted traits that we see in them. And this gifted traits that we see, not just in our 2E learners, but in students who have been identified with gifts and talents, and they have ability to comprehend faster than most of their peers, which is sometimes challenging for them, because when they grasp it, they want to move on. I remember my child used to say, oh my God, school is so slow. They have intuitive understanding of basic skills. They don't want to be bothered with basic skills. And like I said, it's not all of them. I never had to teach my child multiplication facts, but she figured out before I could teach her that she said it's a faster way to do addition. And most of our gifted students have tendency towards complexity. They love tasks when it's complex, not difficult, but complex. Because it requires the ability then to use their creative and critical thinking minds to solve those complex tasks. And some of our kids, most of them have need for precision. They want it to be precise. And they get really upset when you just say, it's okay, we can live with that. They don't want to live with that. They just want it to be precise. They have a high expectations for themselves, even when we don't do that to them. You might have just okay, like, oh, it's okay. But for them, the expectation is so high, and when they don't meet it, it's a problem because they've set that on themselves. And even when you're trying to talk them out of it, it's a challenge, which is why the anxiety, all that stuff comes into play. Not because of what people do to them, but what they've done to themselves by having a very high expectation for themselves. Gifted students also have divergent interests, meaning they can, like music, do their theater, be very good at math and science, have an interest in just things like cooking, baking, all kinds of stuff. So you can't pin them to one interest. So how does those areas of talent impact our two e-learners? So most of our two e-learners have those gifted traits. So in addition to the extreme frustration that some of our gifted learners feel when they cannot meet their own and others' expectations, then you throw in the caveat of having a disability. Sometimes those disabilities are even hidden. And that influences their performance in school. Now, the areas of disability, this is a list that is not, this doesn't mean that we don't have other kids who have one or more, two, or even some that are not listed here. But the areas of disability that we most often see with our two e-learners are specific learning disabilities. Most people would say LD. Emotional disabilities, which often is referred to in most cases as ED students. We have our students with autism spectrum disorder. People refer to them as autistic students. We have our orthopedic impairment, which is actually better because we can see them. The disability is not hidden. We have other health impairment, including ADHD and ADD, which sometimes is hidden and we can't tell if the child is just not wanting to learn or the child is lazy. So those hidden disabilities are the challenge for our two e-learners. Hearing or vision impairment, I always say those ones are easier to detect. They're not hidden. Because if a child can't hear or can't see, you know for sure that they can't. And speech or language impairment, which is also visible. It's not hidden, but at younger age, it's difficult for us to identify those kids because sometimes you're like, oh, they might just not have developed, they're not developing in alliance with their peers, but for some, it might just be that they have a speech impairment and haven't been identified. And I know that when we think about characteristics of 2E learners, this is actually new in research, that we stop labeling them all the characteristics and jumbling them all in one. We actually have to break down how can we define the characteristics? Is it intellectual? Is it physical? Is it emotional? Is it social? And because we have to really put them into those labels, like when you say the child is verbal, the child is this, we have to break it down into those four categories. But we can't really say that it's a strength or weakness because it depends on how it shows up. And we'll share examples of what that means. So these are intellectual characteristics of our 2E learners. And this is not the entire list, just making it for this webinar. I just had to make sure that it wasn't overwhelming, but this is not an exhaustive list. We have more of those intellectual characteristics not listed here. So the reason I said we can't say it's a strength or weakness, if a child is highly curious, inquisitive, one asking lots of questions, it can be a strength and it can be a weakness, because you can be very highly curious, but the way you present your curiosity might be a turnoff to other people, and which makes them avoid some of our students. So it's really how do we help them to be themselves and help other people to understand who they are. Some of them are able to concentrate deeply in areas of interest. And most of our 2E learners have inconsistent academic achievement, which is why they come to us. So because of those areas of talent, they might just be so good in math and science and struggle in reading or writing. And so a child can be an A student in one area and it's failing another subject. Or their interest might just be baseball card. Some of them just do one thing over and over and over. Some of them might just love Star Wars. I have a student right now who, when I go to visit him at his school, anytime I talk about Star Wars, his face shines up and that's all he wants to engage in. And the challenge for most of our 2E learners is that sometimes they have difficulty with long-term or short-term memory. They might not even remember what they had for breakfast. Or they might not remember what happened in school. So when we ask the question, what happened? They're like, I don't know. It's not because they don't know. It's because they just can't remember. It's just the way they're wired. And then when we talk about their physical characteristics of 2E learners, most of their physical characteristics are not hidden. We can see them, but some are. So when a kid is extremely sensitive to taste, smell, and sound, the cafeteria might not be the best place for that child because it's loud, there's a lot of smell, and they don't even want to eat what everyone else is eating. They might choose to eat the same thing over and over, and it might just sound, people look at them like, how can you eat pretzels every day? It's because of the challenge with texture and all that makes it difficult for them. So, and this is a challenge for our school-age 2E learners, unusual sleep cycles. Oh my God. My child went through that. So I know that for sure. They are awake at night And they're sleepy during the daytime, which makes it difficult to wake them up to go to school. When I say asynchronous physical development, meaning they can be intellectually developed with their peers, but struggle in those physical activities that their peers can do. They're not developmentally at the same level as their peers. And another one that is hidden that many people do not understand is they have trouble with modulating voice levels. So sometimes in class, a teacher might not even be aware that they're raising their voice, and that just becomes a problem because that's all they hear. They can't hear what the teacher is saying. They just hear that the voice level is going up. And so they just tune out. They become anxious. They want out because it creates, just reminds them of trauma, of things that they want to avoid, and they sometimes will want to be excused from that environment. And so many of them appear chaotic or disorganized. They might choose to wear the same clothes, might choose not to take a shower, choose not to brush their hair or brush their teeth. It can be a challenge for a parent. I know for the fact that waking up every day and doing the daily reminders, please clean your room, organize your stuff, so we're not looking for things before we leave every morning. That is a challenge every parent who lives with a child who is chaotic or disorganized, but they can find their stuff. You just can't find it for them. You don't know how to find it, but they know exactly where they placed it. And some of them have difficulty sitting still. They just don't want to sit. You say, oh, please sit down, and they don't want to sit because that's not preferred mode of learning for them. Or standing in line. When I go to schools and I see kids all standing in line, especially in elementary school, and I see that child who's wiggling, wants to move out of the line, doesn't even understand why we're standing in line, or working with the group. It's not because they choose to, it's just that sometimes they're not even aware that that's what everyone else is doing. And those are the behaviors that people see and label as a challenge sometimes. And then we have emotional characteristics of our two e-learners. This is not an exhaustive list. It's a long list. I just could not put all in this presentation. They are very loyal. When they love hard. Like I said, they set unrealistic goals and expectations that you and I can't even believe that they would do to themselves. But that's what makes it a challenge to get them off that expectation. And when they can't achieve that expectations, oftentimes they just shut down. The asynchronous emotional development is also a challenge. They might be intellectually higher than their peers, but when it comes to emotional, they're probably, much lower than their peers. Some of them are impulsive, compulsive, obsessive, with doing the same thing over and over, or doing it the same way all the time. They might appear stubborn. They have their opinions, and sometimes people are not willing to listen or to give them opportunity to say how they feel. And so it appears that they are argumentative when they're just trying to, can you please hear my own perspective on this or my opinion? And yet, when you criticize them for either being, always wanting to share their opinion or always wanting to, tell you, argue other ways of doing stuff, And when you criticize them, they're very sensitive to that because that's not why they're doing what they're doing. So when you criticize them, it's almost like, oh my God, I can't believe that you're picking on me. That's how they come across. Like, I just want to be me. And the last on this list, but not the least, like I said, this is not an exhaustive list, is that they often are bored. When the setting is not challenging, they are bored. They roll their eyes, they want out, they don't feel included. And they most times will feel frustrated and feel held back by traditional pacing and learning practices like, oh, my child, like we're going to memorize multiplication facts, or we're going to do this rote memorization. It just doesn't appeal to them at all. Oh, you're going to do 5 problems, and then for homework, then you're going to do this. You can't do this before this. When they just want to tell me how to apply this learning into my life, then I'm okay. But that step-by-step factual knowledge becomes a challenge to most of our 2E learners. And that's often why some of them will fail the SOL, even though we know that they have the ability to apply the learning into doing other stuff, is because of it's just the factual knowledge, and then you answer multiple choice questions. They don't do often well with that way of learning. But like I said, not all 2E kids have the same characteristics. We have to be mindful that I'm using examples, doesn't mean that every 2E kid has the same characteristics as I said. Now we're going to talk about their social characteristics, which is often why a lot of people don't want to be around some of our 2E learners. They feel lonely. They don't know how to make friends because their interests sometimes are not what everyone else wants to think of. They do not know how to take turns in conversation. So the asynchronous social development might just be so much lower than their peers. They oftentimes can't read body language or verbal cues and all those things. And so they just appear confused. But then some of them have so much concern for social justice. You hear them say, but it's not fair. It's not fair. They're so focused on what is fair and what is right and how people are being treated, and including themselves. They might appear socially awkward, and oftentimes they're bullied at school. My child was bullied. And so which makes them gravitate towards adults or with much younger or older children because they feel safe, they feel that they can connect with those people better than their peers. Even with their high ability, their self-esteem of themselves is oftentimes low. They're easily frustrated, and most of them will have high social anxiety, like things that you and I would enjoy doing, like meeting family, being out with friends, creates a lot of anxiety for them for all those reasons that we just mentioned above. And so being at school, being in groups, putting them in becomes something that really creates a lot of anxiety and sometimes makes them not want to participate in activities that we want them to be part of. So most of our 2E kids have challenges with executive function. So it's difficult for them to complete multiple tasks, and that's what school does. You go to math, you do this homework in math, you do English, you do all that stuff, and then you say, oh, when you go home, you have homework in this and then you have to go participate in sports and do this, and it becomes a lot in their brain. The brain can't handle all this multiple tasks. And so it's almost like they're throwing the ball in the air and hoping that they can catch one. And then some of them have challenge beginning tasks on time because they overthink it sometimes. Like they're thinking, like, what is this? What am I doing? And for some, it might just be trauma of the past that makes it difficult for them to begin tasks on time. And some of them might begin, but the completion of the task might require a lot of prompting, a lot of reminders, which creates frustration for them completing homework and all the things that comes along with being a student. It becomes a challenge for both parents and for the school. And like I said, learning basic skill is a challenge because they don't want to learn the factual knowledge. They just want to remember we talked about complexity because it's so basic. They often will tune out. And so oftentimes when you connect the concept to the basic facts, they really respond better to that. And the greatest challenge we see at school is the planning, organizing, and prioritizing their whatever they need to do. The organizing is huge, especially for our kids in terms of writing, even the planning. You have to plan your thoughts, put it on paper, then organize it, and then put it in order. That is a challenge for most of our 2E learners. And usually the IEP will have all this as how do we teach them to do the skills? Because we have to explicitly teach the skills to our 2E learners. They do not learn it by osmosis. They don't learn it by watching other people. It has to be explicitly taught to them and given several opportunities to practice. And it doesn't mean that they will always get it right. They might do it well for some time and then fall off the wagon. So we need to be patient with them as we teach it year in, year out. It's truly what sometimes makes them quit because people are not patient enough to understand that just because they did it in 1 year doesn't mean that they're going to follow through next week or next year. So in FCPS, this is where the challenge lies. And in my few months of being in this role, this used to be one of the things that really frustrated me, and it's still something that we're working on. Is how do we identify them? How do we identify our 2E learners? Because most of our 2E learners have not been identified. I'm going to be honest with you. And the reason is because in FCPS, at least we try to use a holistic approach. If I were being cited by a lot of states, we're no longer going to be using the GBUS. For those of you that have had children go through the GBUS, we have the HOPE scale, which is new this year. So it's going to be truly better and help most likely better to identify our 2E learners using the HOPE scale, not the GBUS. So in Fairfax County, we also have what we call the young scholars, meaning that we understand that kids develop the gifted potential might develop over time. So we give them multiple opportunities to be identified. Start in second grade. A kid can also come back in third grade, in fifth grade, or whenever year they come into FCPS up until seventh grade. Seventh grade is the last year I do the identification for level 4. But like I said, we have level 3, level 2, level 1 in addition to level 4. But we have multiple opportunities where parents can keep resubmitting evidence of their child and showing that the child deserves to be identified as either a level 4 or level 3, whichever one that the parents deem fit for their child. And then we also consider evidence of characteristics of and behaviors associated with gifted, all those traits I talked about, and we look at it from multiple criteria. And this has just been, something that has been dear to me, is that when we understand that people from different cultures manifest intelligence or abilities in different ways. And we don't allow the language or the culture to be a deterrent or a hinder to us looking at the child if they have the potential to be in the advanced academic program. And why sometimes it's very difficult to identify our 2E learners. Like I said, most of our 2E learners have not been identified. So a child whose strength masks their disability in early grades and might be identified for the gifted program, but not for special education services. So if the kid is showing all this great potential and the ability is masking the disability, when we say the disability is hidden, the child might just be identified for gifted service, but not for special education service. And for some of our kids, the disability might be what everyone sees. So it masks their strength, and then those students are identified for special education services, but not for the gifted program. And for some of our 2E learners, both disability and strength may mask each other, and they're neither identified for special education or for gifted education. So they're just floating with everyone else, because we say, oh, they're average, because both the disability and their abilities are just masking each other and nobody recognizes their potential. And given that we say they are 2E learners, we have to provide them with dual programming needs. We cannot serve just the special education or the gifted education. We have to serve both programming needs. Means we need to address their intellectual abilities as well as their challenges recognized as disabilities in FCPS. So the way we do that is that we ensure that we provide them with appropriate challenging learning environment in their areas of strength. That we attend to the learner's interests and what motivates them, meaning we need to know who they are, their interests, identify what motivates them in order to get them to the learning environment that is very appropriate for them. We also have to provide instruction or tutorials. Like I said, we have to explicitly teach the areas of challenges, or especially in those executive functions, in order for them to actually perform to the best of their ability. And we have to teach those learning strategies and explicit instruction. Like I said, those executive functioning skills have to be explicitly taught every year. We should never say, oh, they're doing well, now we don't need them. Yes, they might be doing well in one area, but they still need the reminders, all that stuff, in order to continue to make the progress that we saw the previous year. So the level of intensity might decrease, but we still need to continue to revisit those skills that we know they're struggling. And some of them require assistive technology in order to show what they know. If the child is visually impaired or hard of hearing, or the child needs a computer to write or to demonstrate their learning, we have ATS, assistive technology specialists, who will come out and assess that child and provide the services they need. And we have to ensure that counseling and guidance are available when needed. Some of our kids have those emotional needs and social skills that need to be acquired. We do that by making sure that they have the guidance and also the counseling to support those areas if that's an area of need for them. Now we have our families and parents. We all have our different roles, all stakeholders. It takes a team of people to meet the needs of 2E learners. So we have parents and families, and we have a role for each and every one of us. As a parent of a 2E child, I knew that I had my role, and it was really very, very important that I communicate with my child's school, that I support the school in identifying my child, provided work for referral, evaluation, eligibility, IEP, or even had a gifted plan developed for my child. And that's what we encourage parents to be part of this process. Then it's truly sometimes as parents or families, you see those documentation, you see those strengths and abilities in various settings in academic areas that the school might not even see. So please, please, please be part of providing those documentations. So just saying it is totally different than showing them how. Being evidence, we need evidence. So you can say, my child was part of this, and this is what they produce. So it's not enough to say those things. In order for us to help in identification, we need the evidence provided. You can document what your child is saying, their thoughts, their processes, all that. You can write it down. I did this and my child said this. You write it. And sometimes you know better how your child learns and how their disability impacts their learning process. So it's we want parents to help us in doing that and providing the documentation. Unfortunately, without documentation, it's often very difficult for the schools to do what they need to do in identifying a true e-learner. So we're continuing with the parents' role. We want you to teach it, to advocate for your child when they're younger, but as they grow older, we want you to teach them how to advocate for themselves. And also to focus on how to develop their talent as well while attending to their disability. We can't focus on their disability. We have to attend to that, develop the child's talent, but attend to their disability. You might have to help them develop their social group with peers who share similar interests. Because on their own, they cannot do it. So it might be left to you as a parent to tell me who else has that interest, or share your interest, your child's interest with other parents. And they might say, oh, my child does the same. And then you start building that community of friendship for them because they don't know how to do it. And then you have to determine the best way to collaborate as frequently as necessary with your child's school. So the school and the families need to agree. Do you want us to send a weekly email? Are you sending a day-to-day chat sheet to tell me how my child is doing at school? Or do we meet monthly? Whatever way you choose to collaborate with your child's school, please make sure that you're communicating with them and that you're in agreement as to what it is. Because we have to remember that schools have to address the needs of all learners. And I know even as a parent of a 2E child, I wanted my child's needs met right away. But I also, as a teacher, I knew that I could not send an email every day to my child's teacher, that was not sustainable. And you have to share your child's IEP goal as early as possible. I started sharing my child's IEP goal with her in 4th grade because I needed her to know that these were her IEP goals and that she needed to help me make sure that I was measuring and charting her progress towards the goal. And if the goal wasn't appropriate, then we had to get rid of it and choose a goal that was more appropriate. So your child's IEP should not be something that you take away from them or that you don't share with them. Children should know their IEP goals and how they're working towards meeting those goals. Celebrate their high achievement and acknowledge those areas that they're still working on, because it's a challenge when we just focus on those areas and we don't celebrate their achievement. And keep it real. Don't overdo it, because then they don't trust or believe you. You have to just be mindful as how you celebrate. I'm very proud of you working hard towards this. I know this is still an area of challenge, but we're working towards it. It's a team. They have to know that you're on their team. And then what support do you need at home to make sure that we meet the needs of our 2E learners? Structure is so critical. You have to structure your home so that they know what to expect. The schedule, the reminders, how do you put those reminders? I used to have a Post-it note on my child's door where I would write things that would happen that her teacher had talked about or her day would look like. I would write it down and I will go with her and we'll just check it off as we did those things. Whatever works for you. I know now that as an adult, she uses her phone app to set her reminder. Even when I talk to her on the phone, she's putting her phone, using it, her reminders, she's using her calendars. Whatever works for your child, find a way to make sure that you create structure that works for them. Emotional regulation practice. They cannot see us being out of control all the time. As children, watch what we do more than what we say. So it's very important that we show them how to truly regulate their emotions. When they're so upset and they're throwing things, we have to show them, how do you address it? How do you deal with because it's going to be something that they're working on for a long time, but we have to help them practice it at home where they feel safe. Help them take perspective, because even with my children, I have to help both of them, because this one will call me and say this one did this, but then I have to help them see okay, this is how you feel. How do you think the other person is feeling? Let me show you what that might be the perspective so you can take it. We have to do that with them, or else they only see their own concern, their own needs, and if they don't see other people's perspective, then it becomes a challenge to relate to other people. And you have to meet them where they are. You parent the child you have, not the child you wish you had. It might be frustrating that you know that they're not at the same, a social, emotional, or physical developmental level as their peers, but please, please, please focus on their strength and mindful of those areas that are not fully developed. Find a way for them to have a sleep pattern, go to sleep on time. I actually went the route of nutrition. My child was a swimmer. She used to eat banana during the daytime. and it will keep, she was awake at night. And then the nutritionist said, no, the banana is the last thing at night, and yoga. So we went the nutritional route to help her sleep on time so she could wake up fresh. It's a challenge, but you have to work on helping them get some sleep. And you also getting some sleep. Pick your battles. Not every battle is worth fighting. You can't win it all. And in the process, you're always fighting a battle with them. So pick the battles that you know and tell them why this is important to you. This is a non-negotiable because. You might not get them to dress like you or wear what you want them to wear. But if they're sleeping and eating and getting along, then that's a battle that you can fight. Not every battle is worth fighting. You set expectations, but be mindful that they have a high expectations for themselves. And communicate repeatedly with them. This is what I expect you to do. I know it might be a challenge, but I'm willing to support you in doing it. And these are references. Like I said, this recording will be available to everybody. And now we open it up to questions and comments.
All right, Nonye, thank you so much. And we have lots of things happening in the chat. So I am asking everyone to bear with me because I'm going to go back through, Nonye, and find questions for you. So please, we will get started in just a sec. All right. So, hang on. I just don't want to miss people's questions. Okay. So one parent made kind of a long comment, but with regard to the idea of, say, I think families are thinking out there that some of our center programs may be dissolving and that students will be going back to their base schools for level 4 services. And so if you could just clarify for families, that might be really helpful.
So thank you for that question. So we have our center schools, which we'll always have, but we also have level 4 programs in schools. The center programs are those kids who are identified centrally, meaning we identify them for level 4 services in the central office. The school-based level 4 are schools making that decision when the center kids have left. The schools are like, we know these kids can function in a level 4 programs at our school. And in our office, we actually have someone, the specialist, who supports the kids in level 4 local programs. So the center schools are there and the local level 4s are there.
All right. Thank you. Okay. So I appreciate you clarifying that for families, because I know, sometimes that things like that get out in the community, and we want to make sure that people have the information that they need. All right. So another parent is asking around maybe having you comment on the challenges of raising, a 2E learner together with a child who perhaps does not have a special education component to their exceptionality.
So a 2E learner has to have both the intellectual ability and the special education component. That's what makes them dual disability. There has to be both. So if a child just has the intellectual ability and is struggling in some areas, great. But without the IEP, we do not consider them 2E. That's basically the federal definition of 2E learners. There has to be disability that qualifies them for special education services or 504 plan.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right.
And thank you all for those questions.
Yes.
I really think
No, we have lots of them. I did just want to let people know too that of course this is being recorded. It will be out on our YouTube channel. We will make sure that everyone gets a copy of that link. Um, and so so another parent is concerned about just, their experience has been that the training of staff, the environment sometimes in schools, it makes it really difficult for our 2E students to be successful. Um, what might you, what, as you've been in your role now for a little bit of time, Nonye, how might um, you being in this role support schools and training and understanding of how we really work with and support our 2E students?
so. That's a very, 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 very good question. Because yesterday I got a call from an assistant principal who happens to have a 2E child herself. And she's been in her role at that school for this is her second year. And she identified all the challenges of even supporting 2E learners. But what we came to conclusion was her staff didn't even know the characteristics of 2E learners. People were still using the word like lazy, uh, difficult working with. They chose the behavior and never identified the strength. So I'll be honest with you all to say that our staff, we have a very diverse faculty, a staff in FCPS. Some have been around for so long and have never really known who 2E learners are. In fact, somebody asked me a question the other day and said, "Who are these kids?" I'm like, "Oh my Lord." That's always an opportunity for me to teach them. So the knowledge and understanding is not there for all our faculty and staff. And so the environment, when you don't know who they are, you don't understand the characteristics, then you don't know how to serve them, which is why I started with the strategic plan. And so having that at the forefront of everything we do will force school leaders to really, truly be open to offering professional development, just like I'm having with you guys. I'm also leading those workshops and webinars in schools. But it really comes to principals understanding that if their staff does not have the knowledge and understanding to even know the characteristics and how to meet their needs, then they can't serve them. So some principals have been very proactive in inviting me at the beginning of the school year to do an ongoing PDs for their faculty, but some haven't even reached out or some don't see the need. So I really, 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 truly, truly ask you parents that when you see those needs, you identify those needs, that you talk to the school, but that you reach out to me so that I can then say, I think we need a PD to get your staff to understand who the 2E learners are. That's how we're going to do it. I need you all to be working with me, but working with your schools so we can truly best meet the needs of our 2E learners.
No,
you're going to be my
you.
eyes, and you're going to be the eyes, the ears to see, and then to talk to the school first, but then please reach out to me.
Yeah. And just for our audience, Nonye and I have shared some conversations, and I have shared with her some of the concerns that you all have expressed to us here at the Family Resource Center. So we're going to continue that collaboration, and so please know that, we are talking to each other, and I know Nonye is working on lots of strategies in order to bring professional development to our schools, as well as to families. Now, this question is always a big question. It's this question that we get a lot here, Nonye, at the Family Resource Center around supporting our 2E students in those honors and advanced, classes, whether that be a lot of times it's happening more so needing support at the middle and high school levels. How might FCPS start to be thinking about addressing those needs?
So thank you. And I'm going to be honest, Mary Beth was one of the first people that I collaborated with. which is why we're having this webinar. Because I know parents reach out to her, and I was one of those parents who just will bang my head, like, where do I get help from? Oh my God, I'm really lost. So we do listen to you all, and your voice really counts a lot. So because of what Mary Beth had shared with me and what I had observed, even as an educator, when I was in the school setting, in middle and high school, and with my own child, I know that those honors classes, the teachers don't know how to. And now we're having a conversation with, I'm meeting with the DSSs, the directors of student services, the special education chairs, all special education chairs. I'll be in there attending their meetings for 30 minutes all throughout the year. I'm attending all the ARTs, Advanced Academic Resource Teachers meetings. I'm having office hours to support them. So we're beginning to have that conversation. I thank you all for really seeing the need of creating my role. Because in my role, I've been able to start bringing people to the table to say, when they are in this classrooms, when they're in honors classes or whatever level classes, they still need support. What does the support look like? Let's have a conversation using their child's IEP to identify what support might look like. All 2E kids are not the same, and they don't need all the same support. But that conversation is beginning now because we're talking with all our DSSs. I'm going to be meeting with all the honors and the AAP teachers also in their different departmental meetings to start creating this knowledge and understanding. What does it mean to have a child who is 2E in an honors class? What support might be necessary to make sure that the child is not surviving but thriving? So we're beginning that conversation, and I'm also doing a lot of school visits to identify those places where we might need to do more than just have a conversation or do a PD. Might be a place where I visit more often.
Great. No, thank you. I think for some of our families that are with us this morning who, are just starting this process and may not have as much knowledge as some of our other families here, a mom is asking around, when, as a child enters kindergarten and we start to see that this child, may be gifted in certain ways, but also may have some other needs. How does the process work? So I think some families don't know, like, when we do kind of that initial testing and all of that. If you could just kind of briefly explain when that starts.
So the process for formal identification starts in second grade. Okay. But as a parent, you start seeing those, you have those, like as a parent, I knew from age 5 that there was something quite not, because I had a first child who didn't have a disability, well, was identified for gifted. But from 5 years old, I knew something was quite different. I would not say different. Yeah, there was some differences. And so I started keeping track of, this is what I noticed. So when she got to second grade, when she was identified for gifted, that's where the process starts. The second grade is where they do the formal testing, where all the kids are identified, either for level 4. That was when I brought up the challenge, because I knew that if they just focused on her abilities, that this area that I was noticing as a parent might not even come up until later years. So I truly implore you parents to start keeping the evidence. Remember, I said documentation. This is what I noticed at home. So that from kindergarten to second grade, when they do that second grade evaluation, you have enough data to show the school. I'm concerned in this area because, not because you say, oh, he doesn't do this. You say, this is why I'm concerned. My child takes 25 minutes, just to sit down at the dining table and can't even bring up her thoughts on paper. And it took her this many hours to do this writing that I know could have been done in 20 minutes. You have to provide documentation in order for the school to have enough evidence to look at the child from the dual programming, disability, and ability needs. So the first time is in second grade. But the data you should start the data collection and documentation as early as possible. As soon as you notice that those differences, start collecting data and saying, okay, this is what my child said, this is what I said.
Yeah. And could you talk just briefly, Nonye, about the AART in elementary schools and how they may support some of our learners who are younger than second grade?
Yeah. So our ARTs, we now have them in all middle and all elementary schools. In elementary school, they have pull-out services for K through 2, and also pull-out services for second and third and fourth and fifth, and then they have those services for sixth. So the pull-out services from K through 2 also helps our ARTs to start noticing those kids who on paper might not be your typical advanced academic student, but have all those stuff. And then they can start like I've had several ARTs invite me to their school to observe kindergartners, first graders, and second graders and say, this child is brilliant. I know he is. He tells me all this stuff, but this child also struggles writing. And this child sometimes will get so upset when he doesn't get his way. So those ARTs work in schools. But I'm going to be honest with you, the way principals use the ARTs in every school is truly up for interpretation. So principals make those decisions. Some of them are full-time and are not teaching classes, so they can actually do the push-in and pull-out. But it's truly based on what principals are doing with them. But that's supposed to be their role in helping us identify those kids even before they get to second grade of formal identification and providing the support they need. Some of them will ask for a behavior interventionist to come with me to observe the kids and see, is this a behavior that's a result of lack of exposure to knowledge, or is this a behavior that needs additional resources in order for them to support the kid in the classroom?
Great, thank you. So another mom was concerned. Again, I think her child fits in that category where some things are masking, where you talked about masking. And so, you know, the school's concern, as she's reporting to us, is that the child maybe didn't have high enough achievement or IQ to kind of be accepted into an advanced academic program. What tools or what words might this parent be able to use to talk with her school about what she thinks is going on, and being able to maybe collaborate them with her school team on looking at her son again?
So the level of discrepancy has to be there. Like we always see, there has to be a level of discrepancy. Like you can see, sometimes it's processing speed, where, so the child is brilliant, but when it comes to the speed at doing those work, which is why I said they take so long, but doesn't mean they're not intellectually able to do it. So that the level of discrepancy is what we often look at. And then we see, okay, without this discrepancy, what will the child be doing? So the level of discrepancy, first of all, is what we see. And then we're like, okay, this child is scoring at this level with this huge discrepancy. So without this discrepancy, this child will be performing at a higher average or superior rate. So there has to be that discrepancy. It can't just be flat. Because the discrepancy is so glaring that when you see it, which is what I see, I don't often look at the GBERS, because the GBERS is subjective, which is why we're changing it to the HOPES scale. But the discrepancies starts the conversation.
Right. Okay. So making sure, just to clarify, just making sure that when that child is being evaluated for either a 504 or special education program, that we are looking to see that there is a discrepancy between their ability and their achievement.
Yeah.
And so, that's really important. And then, and making sure that we're having those conversations around, even their giftedness as well. And so forth. Okay. I appreciate that.
So we also
Thank
have
you.
to understand that we have levels of ability.
Right.
Because oftentimes not all 2E kids are level 4 kids. And that's true.
Right.
That everybody thinks all 2E learners are level 4. Just like the 5 fingers are not equal, no 2E learner, all 2E learners are not level 4 students.
Yeah. Well, no, and you were really clear that some of our students have giftedness in specific areas. And so they may not encompass all of those,
Mm-hmm.
say, high academic areas, but maybe in the arts or maybe
Yeah,
in social sciences or
yeah.
whatever. So, and we have programming for those students as well.
We do, and that's often the challenge that most parents want their children identified for all level 4. But we have to look at the areas that the child is truly showing the talent and the traits. And that's where we
Yeah.
do the programming. And when the child is happy or thriving in that area, you can start increasing the exposure to other areas.
No, right. Absolutely. All right. So let me scroll down. So let's see. Um, so another parent was just asking around. So when a child um, is found eligible both as an AAP student, an advanced academic student, but also has an IEP or 504 plan, um, I know this parent is asking around like what services are provided, and I know that it really depends, of course, on the needs of the student. But could you just maybe just give us a brief overview of maybe that conversation that that team is having around services?
So for most of our 2E learners, they're either first identified as gifted or as special education. I believe you not. Most of them are not identified straight up as 2E learners. So the school might see the ability before they see the disability. But it's oftentimes that parents will say, yes, my child also has this. So when we identify a child as a level 4 AAP student with an IEP or 504, so we as a team will meet, the team that the school will meet. The team will include the ART, the special education case manager, the counselor, the child's counselor, the a either a gifted education, general education teacher, because the gifted program falls under general education in the state. That's how we code it. So we can say AAP level 4, but they're all still considered gen. So the team will meet and then identify what are this child's strengths based on the IEP or the 504. That's why I said without the IEP or the 504 plan, the child doesn't really qualify for 2E to be identified as 2E.
2E, yeah.
Once the child has both, then the IEP must identify the child's strength. And then we say, okay, this child will be in a level 4 program. Either the math is not, some kids are in level 4 without the math. That's okay. Every child doesn't have to be in math. And that's why we don't include math when we do level 3. So the child's team will talk and they will say, okay, this is the child's strength. This is the IEP goal. The programming needs will be met for this child in this area. If it's a child in the center, the child will be center. Then we'll say the child would have a case manager who would work with the team, either pushing in elementary or just support or meeting with the teachers to provide those accommodations, to design the classroom instruction, to do it. So it depends. It's not that
Right.
so it depends on the need of the child and what the IEP team decides. That's why I said you need to collect documentation to support the child meeting the IEP goals or not. Oftentimes, parents will send emails every day to a teacher and never address the IEP goals. And that's really a challenge because the IEP was written to provide accommodation for your child to meet those areas. And so when you don't refer to those IEP goals until the IEP meeting, you don't have documentation to support either the child is progress towards meeting the goal, then it's truly left to interpretation. So when those goals are identified, it's both the IEP team and the parent should be working closely in contact to make sure that the goals are appropriate for the child at that time and that the accommodations in place are helping the child to thrive, not survive. I keep saying that. When a child
Right.
is thriving, they are happy, the behavior really, really is addressed through those accommodations.
Absolutely. So we've had quite a bit of questions and comments in the chat around executive functioning goals on IEPs. And again, I know that every child is different, so their executive functioning skills may be addressed in different ways. Um, and I mean, I would just share with everyone that's on today that certainly we here at the Family Resource Center can sit down with you and talk about your concern over executive functioning and maybe then help you craft some language that you can talk with your IEP team about. But Nani, do you have any other recommendations for our families around executive functioning goals?
So I must tell parents when they identify those executive functioning to ask the school, how are you explicitly addressing this goal, the skills? Because if we don't address it, if it's up for interpretation where it's happening, it's not happening.
Right.
So you're being very specific. These are my child's executive functioning needs. Where is it being explicit? How is my child explicitly being taught how to? Because there has to be practice that is shared with you so you're doing the same thing at home. And so if you're not getting those information, then that's when you ask the school, where this goal is being explicitly taught. For some, it might be during their learning seminar or whatever. But if it's taught during the learning seminar, I then challenge the special education chair to make sure that those skills are transferable to all the classroom settings. So all teachers teaching that child need to understand those executive functioning deficits and how they can address that, making sure that it's available to all students. It's a UDL. Like I did a PT for a high school on executive function because it's not just our true e-learners that are struggling. Most students are.
Yes.
And so
yes.
Can use that as a tool for all learners. So that's really been my greatest challenge, is that schools are not explicitly teaching those skills. I'm being honest.
Yeah. No, and I completely understand that. I mean, we always, when I was still in the classroom and, doing team taught classes and, some of our general education students really continued to struggle with those executive functioning skills, and we needed to model what were good skills. So that is something that I know we continue to hopefully have teachers doing. We have time for one last question, and I'm so sorry, everyone. I know there's a lot.
Mary Beth, can you share those questions with me if possible?
Sure.
And I'll do my best to answer it in writing, and then you can post it somewhere they can see.
Absolutely. Yes, I can absolutely do that. Just so one last question. So this is from a mom who's got a child in second grade who has an IEP, and her real worry is about, overloading her child because they're trying to decide whether or not, because I think she's probably qualified for AAP services, but the worry is around kind of that maybe social emotional wellness on trying to address the special education needs, but then also the rigor of AAP and just, that's a lot to put on a young child. So what advice might you just give our families who might be struggling with this decision?
So I always say the first thing is to try it first and have evidence to say, this was overwhelming because I everything I do is based on data, evidence. We need evidence. Right. So if you say to your child, we're going to try this out and see how you go. I need to know, I'm going to meet with your teacher. I'm going to meet with the team. And then you identify those things that you're seeing at home that might make it, that gives you the information you need to say, this is overwhelming for him right now. Because my fear is if we just focus on the disability and keep the child away from really, meeting their intellectual needs, that they start to doubt that they're really smart. And then the behavior really gets worse sometimes. So it's trying first and then having enough evidence to say, I think this is overwhelming. Or can we try, but have all this accommodation in place so that he doesn't feel overwhelmed? So those accommodations are truly tools that you can use to make sure your child's needs are being met, but that you can say, okay, I need this accommodation in place so that he doesn't have to do homework every night. A second grade child doesn't really need to do homework. He can read based on his interest. He doesn't have to read. And so those are things that you need to negotiate and put on the IEP goals and accommodation so that your child can still be in the setting, being intellectually challenged, but not meeting all those basic skills that makes it challenging for them to even survive.
Great. Nonye, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. We knew it was going to be a very exciting conversation. Um, please be on the lookout for, and actually it's already up, October 6th is our next in the series. And we're very excited to that. Registration is open. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to make sure to get any of your other questions over to Nonye so she can answer those for you. And we really appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you all again. Thanks again, Nonye, for everything.
Thank you, parents. Thank you, Rita. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Mary Beth.
Thank you.
Yeah, look forward to seeing you all.